Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Reading on the third establishment of mindfulness, mindfulness of citta. And how bhikkhus does a bhikkhu abide contemplating mind as mind? Here, a bhikkhu understands mind affected by lust as mind affected by lust, mind unaffected by lust as mind unaffected by lust. He understands mind affected by hate as mind affected by hate, mind unaffected by hate as mind unaffected by hate. Similarly for delusion. These deal with the way the citta is being affected. You can say winds blowing across it or currents running through it. Understands contracted mind as contracted mind and distracted mind as distracted mind. So these two deal with, say, the shape of the citta. Whether it's contracted, it's kind of tight or compound or retracted, like either effects of tension or fear or withdrawal in a tight, contracted way, or hardness of heart, narrow-minded, tight-fisted. All these give us a sense of what this feels like. And distracted, sometimes translated as scattered, is when it feels all broken up, like part of leaves blowing in the wind. Is this that? Distracted. These then affect, if you like, the shape that we're in, to extremes. It means the citta is not really properly massaged, pliable, it's brittle, and it shatters or it seizes up and goes rigid. Understands exalted mind as exalted mind, unexalted mind as unexalted mind. Exalted refers to more levels. For example, exalted mind would be a mind of loving kindness. It's uplifted, it's buoyant. It's not heavy, it's not dragged down, it's lifting. Devotional heart, it's exalted, it's lifted. And in that lifted state, we see things rather differently. We see things more joyfully and more benignly. Surpassed mind is surpassed mind, unsurpassed mind is unsurpassed mind. This is to do with the citta, whether it's either fully extended, fully opened, or so you can't get past it. You can't find any edges to it. It's boundless. This is also to do with metta and also samadhi. It's like this piti qualities of the mind just doesn't seem to have any edges to it. And concentrated mind is concentrated mind, and unconcentrated is unconcentrated. We're unified. We haven't got inner divisions. It seems very unified, and there's a certain gravity to it. Not heavy, but composed. It doesn't blow away. It doesn't knock down easy. Liberated mind is liberated mind, and unliberated mind is unliberated mind. So we should understand this liberated means things like free from the effect of greed or fear, depression. And this isn't like complete liberation. This is, we say, liberation can be expressed in kind of more limited ways. So, I may realize Nibbana, but my mind at this time, this state, is liberated from stinginess. Yeah, absolutely. Or bitterness, or fault-finding. Oh yeah, that stain is removed. My mind feel the effect of that. So actually looking at this citta, here it's translated as mind. I think I've talked about this many times. What it means to you is your concern, but it's clearly not a process of thought. It's where we are affected. Completing mind is mind internally, externally, internally and externally. It's rather mysterious, but to me this probably means something like, the mind is kind of absorbed in its own processes, or it's being impacted by sensory phenomena internally when it's kind of in its own qualities, externally when it's being affected by things that irritate or arouse or gladden. Arising factors, vanishing factors, factors that pass through are to be understood as this is not the mind, this is something passing through it, this is a sad feeling passing through it, this is a gloomy mood passing through it, moving through it. So we make sure we don't mistake the clouds for the sky. Or else mindfulness to the extent that there is mind. So this is like the bare knowing, or sometimes bare awareness, jnanamutang. There's a sense of something that just makes no differentiation, doesn't go into the details. It just, all this is just that. It's a kind of very dispassionate, stepped back perspective. When there's absolutely no kind of entanglement with the factors that are passing through, then it's just this, So how are you feeling? Fine. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just there happens to be some irritation passing through, but I'm fine. You get the big pictures. Yeah, something bothering, but doesn't take over. So this is more of the step back, big picture, and of course, what we often notice occurs is details suddenly drag us in a way that's part of our conditioning, isn't it? To get into details of things, look at fine details of, colours of paint, size of cloth, measuring sticks. But this is really to do with manas, the measuring mind. That's his job. And you're really careful that habit. If you start doing the same thing towards moods and concerns, you pick up an irritating thought and you go right into it. And then what happens is called papancha. Everything explodes, this cascade of emotions starts churning around. One has gone in to a disturbing thought. Sometimes even with the idea that you'll fix it or work it out. I'll do some figuring on it. So one becomes embroiled and loses the picture, big picture. This is mind. Remember, this is just a factor passing through. Doesn't mean it's irrelevant, it just means The proper way to deal with it is to see it as that. Then we have the balance. We've got our feet on something that's solid, steady, and it can review more clearly, rather than going right into things. And this is something to trust. You know, some things you have to hold at arm's length in order to deal with them properly. Otherwise they just grab you. Dealing with a snake, you don't grab it, you use a fork stick. However kindly you deal with it, that's the right distance. Because this is a snake, you know, and it's frightened and it's panicking and it could do all kinds of things, so let's just get that sense of calm and dispassion. So we get some sense of these guidelines of training and working on this very intimate area. And all this in the Satipatthana presentation, all this can be contained through what we call sense restraint, virtue, embodiment. So where is this citta? Well, it's kind of a fake question really, but because you can't exactly place it in a physical location. But you notice if you enter more fully into your embodied experience, you sense all that. You get a much better, it's no longer so covered by sights, sounds and thoughts. It's revealed. The body or embodiment acts as a kind of filter where rather than the obscurations of thinking and planning and tomorrow and yesterday and which circumstantial stuff is filtered out. We go into more residual tendencies, heart tendencies, citta tendencies, rather than just, scooting along the surface of our life. So this process of embodiment and mindfulness of body has a deepening effect, and this is why it's cultivated. And the Buddha says you can't really realize the deathless without mindfulness of body, because you don't actually even enter the territory. And the average untrained mind will tend to skitter along the surface, from this to that, to this to that, probably not even realizing what's under the lid, until, bam, something rushes at them. Anger, violence, depression, grief, shakes them. The depths are still there, but we haven't really entered it and dealt with it. So this is sometimes expressed as clearing out the residues. We have temporary things that come and go, sickness, disappointment, so on, grief, things that upset us. They also have residuals, which are the residual tendencies to get angry, residual tendencies to be craving for something to do or have, residual tendencies towards depression and doubt, towards fear, and lack of, so forth. So, because then what happens is wherever you go, if the circumstances change, still you recognise these same tendencies come up. Getting, depressed and lonely in this place rather than that place, feeling ostracised and left out with this group and with that group and with this group and with that group. How come? So he thinks, because that's the way I am. I am this. So that residue becomes, in a way, we call our karmic blueprint, or a template. I just am this way. That's how it is, I'm like this, just have to get on with it. And that's sort of, how does that sound? Does it sound enlightened? No, it sounds resigned to me. It doesn't sound skillful, it sounds resigned. You don't have to be anyway. But just notice the residues are there. You know, one feels lesser, smaller, weaker, or burdened, or threatened, insecure. Everything's a threat and a challenge. You're trying to hold on against the constant chaos of life. And for you, that's a total reality. And you can provide the statistics for it. And another person, oh yeah, there's that, but didn't you see this? Oh, that doesn't really matter. Oh, and then, you know, well, it's good to live in communities. You've got people living very different perspectives, experiencing very similar phenomena on an external level, but internally finding, oh, systems and structures drive me crazy. I'm just so tight and restricted. The other person, oh, it's really nice to have a slot you can just sit there and just let go into and feel what's happening. Residual tendencies. And these are not decisions. We don't decide to have them. This is why they're intimate, they're embarrassing, they're difficult, but they're also extremely pervasive and influential. A lot of the time we're trying to shift into situations where residual tendencies won't get triggered. Yeah. Don't put me in a public situation because my social anxiety wells up. Yeah. And Samanera disrobed because he couldn't bear the idea of having to talk to people. He thought once he became a monk, he'd have to be wise. He could manage it. He said, I have to give Dhamma talks. No, you're a Samanera. You don't have to think about giving Dhamma. You need never give a Dhamma talk in your life. As a monk, we're here just to support you. Yeah, but if I don't give a Dhamma talk, I'll feel useless and not doing the right thing that monks should do. No, I better get out of this. It's too difficult. Wow. I'm not worthy of being venerated. I can't stand the idea of people venerating me. Just makes me feel so embarrassed because I realise how defiled and pathetic I am. Wow. But you are keeping the precepts. Oh yeah. And you do an essential. No, of course. We're not that pathetic. I'm not an Aryan. Well, you don't have to be an Aryan to have some degree of respect. If people can kind of tunnel themselves in, dig their own graves. There's sabotage programs, I call them. We set up paradigms of excellence that we can't possibly achieve. Or we, create or project our fears and anxieties onto other people. She's threatening me. He's pushing me around. No, he's not. He just asks, that's all. Say no. I can't say no because then I'll be seen to be uncooperative and lazy and, oh dear. There's no way, so this isn't a rational process. I don't think anybody wants to be suffering. Just these involuntary programs just come flying out from uncured or uncleared residues of self-impression. And this means, of course, that but these involuntary qualities aren't things we can actually deal with on a voluntary basis. It's not like, okay, just snap out of it. Pull yourself together, man, Because those kind of remarks make you feel even more pathetic, because it's not something you've chosen or can do. Residues are beyond the will. They're beyond the power of will, beyond the personal probe. This is why we have to have this Dhamma process. And sati, mindfulness, and a deepening into samadhi, where a whole different set of energies become available. The Buddhist tradition notices different ways people deal with their difficulties. Is what's called vikambana, suppression, just kind of push it away. Not useless, not of limited use, but sometimes that's all you can do. Just bite your lip and stop. Right? Literally refrain. It's better than just acting on it, but you get some perspective. Tadanga, which is doing reversal. If one feels a lot of ill will, you start to deliberately make a point of cultivating goodwill. Very simple example. And people who a lot are excitable and passionate, contemplate or be in places of silence and coolness. And so these are atmospheres that we can cultivate and seek. There's also different tendencies. One notices, I think when I first encountered some Ajahns, they were so quiet and so still. And though I could understand it intellectually, the emotional feeling was something like they're either depressed or suppressed. I didn't think this, it's just this emotional response of there's something wrong because they're so quiet. I feel uncomfortable with their silence. Their silence makes me feel threatened or nervous or something wrong with me, or they're not saying something, or try to get, feel awkward. I wasn't used to that amount of stillness. Stillness to me occurred when I get depressed. Hopeless and depressed, then when I get still. If that wasn't happening, I'd be excitable and running around. So I didn't actually ever register for a stillness that was anything other than just some cold, flat-hearted state. Yeah. But then you notice, when you start to see it in context, particularly the Burmese Sayadaw is extremely cool. But then when you go to places like Burma and Thailand, you see what they're living in. People are so devotional. There's these huge waves of positive energy. So they just actually act as a counterbalance to the enormous floods of devotion and excitement that's going on around them. But in Britain, you don't get that. So, I think like Ajahn Chah, when he came to Britain, his act changed like a chameleon. In Thailand, he was very still, steady, even quite severe. In Britain, he was jolly and outgoing, because it was a counterbalance to where the mood that people needed. They needed something to lift them up. Whereas one imagines that, at least in Thailand at that time, monks obviously had their problems, but they weren't kind of depressed neurotics. They were kind of sensualist or get angry, simple passions. Whereas he began to recognize that Westerners are mostly a lot of depressed neurotic, think too much, and get into these miserable, depressed, useless, guilty, failed mind states, which to the Thai monks didn't know what that was. Because, the basic religion of Thailand is having fun. You have fun at temples, you have fun, and Katinas is fun. Meditate, you do some meditation as long as it's fun. Go to the monastery because it's fun. And fun is considered good. It's not silly, it's actually nourishing. And you're thinking, well, maybe they're right. Good fun, So they just get very happy to see people they respect. It's not respect. It's not a kind of severe issue of feeling cowed. It's a love. It's a love that's not sexual. It's just a sense of devotional love. And so to turn onto that, if you're naturally exalted, uplifted. But of course, in our culture, that was rather rare. So when we're looking at reversals, very often the reversal that's needed is towards the metta end of the spectrum, and not complicated intellectual understanding. Just simple friendliness and warm-heartedness and relaxing, which is very much Luang Por Sumedho's fundamental strategy a lot of the time. That was generally how he manifested, and continues to. And people think, oh, thank goodness, this doesn't have to be a severe nibbana as extinction. But nibbana is the unbinding of the shackles of depression and doubt. Oh, yeah. So these are kind of, we call these mundane, in that we can move towards those from external situations and pick things up that encourage that change of atmosphere. And then what are called the super mundane are ones that really only occur within the citta through practices of sati and samadhi and the insight that arises. And this is first of all something called cutting, or cutting off the trail that takes us into fear or greed, particularly the trail that takes us into our self, into me again, into those old karmic blueprints again. A trail that we don't realize is a trail because it happens so quick. We suddenly become ourselves. Yeah. And you can't see that unless you've had some time when you've not been in that. This is why it's associated with you have some degree of shift and realization, so you've got something to measure. Oh, that's what it's like when I'm not that. And then you can see what then you can compare it. This is why one of the benefits of samadhi, you get to understand or get some feeling, however minimal or limited it is, oh, this is what it's like when I'm not constricted and contracted and scattered. Just that. This is called a wholesome state. And my chattering mind isn't telling me who I am, bringing up all these topics and beating me up and criticizing and pushing. Oh. It's through removal, not through pasting something on top of it. Oh. So then we have that as a basis for insight, because then you go from there, that's how it happens. There's the trigger, there's the dart, there's the lure, there's the snare, there it is. And so I'm practicing with that, being able to not go down that trail, until the trail dries up. If you like, a leakage, first of all it's just a constant flood, and then you're able to kind of hold that or begin to seal off the leak, and then eventually, so it comes through only a drip at a time, and then it completely sealed and healed. Chitta's completed rather than broken. And the result of that, or those moments when that can occur, piti passaddhi, is a sense of patipasambati, which means you're thoroughly, there's a sense of ease. Oh, and escape, nibbana. When you're not yourself, and you don't even try to be anything. So one can have these moments where, say for samadhi, you get a sense, this is what it's like when I'm in a good space. And that's helpful because it both gives you a reference point where the five hindrances aren't engaging, acting. That, I would say, is the crucial feature. The five hindrances: ill will, passion, restlessness, dullness, lethargy, doubt aren't taking over. This is what it's like. So then these toxic forces are not constantly souring the heart. They become fresh, clear, uplifted. It's like this. So we get a sense, this is what a skillful state feels like. Then you've got a reference point to, something's happening. Now it's getting, affected. Until we have something skillful, established, long enough to be able to really review it and understand it, you don't know, you can't directly sense when the unskillful state occurs, because you're in it all the time. So that process gives you a template. It also helps to strengthen one's faith and resolve and energy. And it's a basis for insight. So in the Buddha's presentation, he says, when the mind is concentrated, collected, then it's able to see things clearly as they are. So it's not like you're in some kind of oblivious state. And I think this is where it goes misunderstood and perhaps incorrectly cultivated, wrong samadhi, stump samadhi. Your mind feels kind of shut down or blocked, numbed out. Then the force of wisdom is not available. So as you're moderating practice, you keep sati doesn't disappear when the hindrances disappear. You keep the sense of sati, contemplating. These states, these happy states or steady states are also changeable, dependently arisen. How does it feel? So cultivating that sense of attuning to the impermanence. Doesn't mean it necessarily passes, it means it's fluctuating and conditioned. Okay, it's just this, some dispassion, we don't get too excited. And where it goes wrong is when either the mind sort of goes into a rather torpid state, it just kind of leans on that state and gives up discernment. Or we get excited, get too much piti, so we get fizzy and can't contain it. Never really been a problem for me, but for some people it is. And in a sense, well then that sense of dispassion, you step back. Okay, it's just that. Stepping back, viraga, dispassion. So wisdom can function in samadhi, otherwise there wouldn't be point in Buddha recommending it. But it says from samadhi, then if you keep the sati there, and you keep that quality of Dhamma Vijaya, exploration going, there's no reason why not to. He doesn't say you abandon the 7 factors of enlightenment, it's you keep them going. And you keep it going, exploring steady states, comfortable states, states noticing a hindrance isn't there, enjoying the space when there's no suffering and stress. Really, how does this feel when I'm not anxious, worried? How does it feel? And also notice the citta seems more expansive, stronger, less brittle, perhaps less myself. So I was able to see yatha bhutang, that which has become. Yatha bhutam jnanadasanam, insightful knowledge, insight, vision, realization of yatha bhutang, that which has become. And what does that mean, yatha bhutam? Well, it's really your residues, that which has been established. It has the result of becoming. Bhuta is the past participle of bhava, of that which has become, come into being. What has become? Myself. That's the residue. And the vision realization is this through mindful discernment, is everything in that package is actually like rather like the image, like the pixels on a television screen. It's just like a little popping light that build up patterns. I think that's the word for it. They're momentary. So what seems to be an entity is actually a series of events. This is the vision of insight. What seems to be entities are really a series of events. So if I see the Buddha image, what's happening? There's a seeing consciousness, there's perception arises, there's focusing, attention is there. So a series of qualities come together: attention, visual consciousness, perception. Right? Without those, there's no Buddha image. If I don't look at it, how can I see it? If there's no visual consciousness, if there's no understanding, oh, that's a Buddha image, then it doesn't happen. So none of these Dhammas exist independently. They come together, a series of micro-events that come together to create apparent reality, fixed reality. And of course, with Buddhas, your relationship is generally, Buddha images, your relationship is generally pretty simple. But when that fixed reality is another person, there are all kinds of other qualities that come in. Interpretation, expectation, what should I be, what does she need, am I good enough, how am I going to deal with this, all these kinds of emotional residues start to well up, particularly in terms of other people. Is he telling me what to do? Is he dominating me? Is he being honest? Kinds of murky emotional stuff wells up that compounds our experience of others. And even more profoundly, the one we call myself is the most volatile and multifaceted concoction. And Buddha's recommendation is whatever you think other people are or aren't, or they're doing, or how they are, or whatever they are, or whether she's a control freak or he's lazy or whatever, whatever you want to make of it. The most important thing is, who are you? Because that's the one you can live with. And you may be right. Maybe these people at work are brutal, insensitive, da-da-da-da-da. But that's not going to do you any good, is it? Because your concern is really you. That's the one you've got to live with. So you notice those feelings of feeling threatened, feeling angry, feeling upset, feeling overwhelmed, feeling left alone, feeling abandoned, feeling I always have to do this, I never get that, other people, and it solidifies. And often the words that come along with it are always, I have to, I never, other people, and should. These are words that cement Dhammas into heavy realities. And where do they come from? Where's the should? Where's the other people? Where's the always? Where's the never? This is where you start to cut through the delusion. Well, right now it's like this. Who are the other people? Well, right now it's this feeling in my heart. Well, that shifted things, didn't it? Always? No, it's repeated, it happens a lot, but it's not always. Okay, shifted a little more weight, it's dropped off. So it's a pattern, isn't it? Yeah. And just start to notice how that pattern occurs. Certain things line up, blub, 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 blub. Flash, bash, and then there it is. Do you see it's a pattern? And this is not about don't make a self out of it. And when the mind has that, citta has the strength and the fluidity, it says this is a pattern. It can really sense these qualities, almost granular. This is the moment of stirring moment, arouse, the stirring, and here comes the reaction. Boom. And there's the run, there's the fire, there's the dart leaps out. So you get, okay, let's take that back again. There's the stirring. Can you just manage, encompass the stirred experience? Not say you shouldn't have it, just encompass the stirred experience of what's in that. This is where I feel victim. I feel it's happening to me. I am the victim of this thing. I'm always under this. Okay, well that's what residue feels like. Or I have to, I've got to, I must, everybody wants me to. Yes. These very provocative arousals. What's that? This is the citta affected by fear, ill will. And then the delusion of making this into a substantial reality rather than an unfortunate pattern. So if we get to the granular level of these stirrings, then this does cut off samucceda, the trail. And then that stirring is something that can be held carefully, given space, breathe through, and it's release. You can sometimes feel these stirrings that happen, have a bodily aspect. You feel yourself tightening in your throat, or you suddenly get very jumpy, or you get a sinking in your guts, when you get a pounding in that, it really feels somatic effect, stirring. And when you get those signs, now's the time to widen. This is the mind. This is, don't follow the trail. Deal with the stirring. And how do you deal with it? By not dealing with it. By not tinkering, fixing, complaining, measuring, contrasting, worrying, just stirring, felt directly, handled directly through mindfulness. The energy subsides. And if we cultivate like that, steadily, the potentials for that stirring dry up. Yes, there will be, things that disappoint, frustrate, offend me, but I will not be stirred. That trail has been cut off. I know it, I'm sensitive to it, but it's not getting inside me. One knows the citta, one knows one's residues, and one knows the sign of stirred. This is something to cultivate, because the point of this is, we're doing, you can do the samadhi when you're on retreat, but after that, forget it, It takes me hours and days to get any decent level of samadhi. Well, yeah, I know what you mean, but this is not just a flash-in-the-pan event. This is samadhi, using the occasions we do have, just to really move along in that direction towards steadying, towards simplifying, towards dismantling hindrances, towards just being with our bodies and breathing. So we begin to, what happens then is you're all, through that you're definitely extending your territory of what you know from that contracted reactive state. You know something, your citta knows itself, and it doesn't forget. So that when we move out of samadhi, we've still got that basic background understanding. This is the template. And I recognize when the blurring and the reactivity occurs, and I know my citta beyond myself. So it's when we cultivate it wisely. And I'm talking to somebody who's been doing meditation over 25 years, even longer, I think. He was saying, how long do you have to keep this going for? He says, every day I've got to get up, got to deal with this, this, that. Just by the end of the day I've managed to calm it down. Then next day I've got to do it all over again. How long do you have to keep going on this? Well, actually, because he was doing quite a defined meditation practice, and I don't want to go into fault finding, but it's one of those kind of intense scrutiny on an object things, and hadn't really turned it towards his own mind. So once the object is removed, then you're back in the same old territory. This is why, I'd like to once again say samadhi is not concentration on an object. It's the full, open collectedness of the heart in a steady state. And you can use mindfulness of objects in order to clear away the hindrances that prevent the citta from being composed and collected. Right? So it's mindfulness clears the obstacles. Samadhi is in quite a natural state. And once you've cleared those obstacles, clear those hindrances, and you know hindrances, you can work on those all day long. Your mindfulness can be there. The more constantly you reduce the potential for hindrances to take over, then you've actually, in that territory of a collected, composed heart. You may not have got into jhana, but you're really at a useful place. And then and you really get the sense within that, the meditation object, if there is an object, is called me. And all that builds it up, and all that it plans, and all the future that it's got mapped out for itself, and all the dead ends that and all the sense of stuck with, and all the sense of obligation, and what other people want, what I should be, and what I never can be, and all that weight. And this is to be reviewed insightfully. Things are being stirred and aroused here. Don't let them proliferate into an external world that you feel bound into. Because it will do that. You're feeling overwhelmed or can't manage or not very good meditator. What does that refer? This is what? This is the citta feeling contracted. And then a story comes out of it. Don't go into the story. It will take you into proliferation. Don't deny the story, but investigate the source of the story. Into those stirrings and pathways. It's possible for those to be removed. So, they say, 3 months change of focus or up, house cleaning session. Once you start to learn how to clean the house, then look after it, keep the house clean. And who knows, because there's nothing better to do anyway. How long is it going to take? I don't know, it's just a good thing to do, and it should be a kind of enjoyable, interesting, companionable thing to do. It's not supposed to be a heavy-duty battle. And just a reminder, one of the things I always find, it's a very simple thing the Buddha said. He said, listen, if this wasn't for your welfare, I wouldn't teach it. Why should I teach it if it's not for your welfare? Of course it's for your welfare, it makes you feel better, therefore I teach it. If it didn't work, if what I'm teaching didn't work, I wouldn't teach it, would I? So of course it works, otherwise I wouldn't teach it. And if you couldn't do it, I wouldn't bother talking to you. Why would I waste my time? But because it is good, because you can understand it, and because it's true. Here are roots of trees, here are lonely places, meditate. Don't let this opportunity be lost on you. Cultivate, cultivate, cultivate. Anyone?